You've all heard anti-woke guys refer to ideas they don't like as the woke mind virus, right?
So my son Xavier is dead, killed by the woke mind virus. So I vowed to destroy the woke mind virus after that.
With this phrase, they characterize such ideas as a disease, and those with whom they disagree as infected, contagious, and dangerous. In other words, they pathologize those ideas and people outside of their group. Certain atheists in the US have a history of doing the same. I'm sorry for this, Daryl. I love the resources your organization provides for apostates. I support your work there, and I want to make it clear to my audience that Daryl is definitely not the anti-woke type. But I do have to talk about the book. In the 2009 book, The God Virus, atheist activist and psychologist Daryl Ray wrote, "Imagine that religion is a virus with its own unique mix of properties. Just as the HIV virus is different than a cold virus, both infect and take over the mechanisms of the body in ways that allow them to reproduce. Religions infect people, create antibodies or defenses against other viruses, take over mental and physical functions, and hide itself within the individual in such a way that is not detectable by the individual, use specific methods for spreading the virus, and program the host to replicate the virus. Every religion is more or less effective in each of these areas." 4 years later, atheist writer Peter Boghossian took this even further in A Manual for Creating Atheists. Page 208. The chapter is called Containment Protocols. Right after quoting that Daryl Ray passage I just read, Boghossian says, "Just as the body is exposed to toxins, so is the mind. Faith is an unclassified cognitive illness disguised as a moral virtue. Each of us dreads the thought of becoming ill, and we take whatever measures necessary to regain our health. Not so with the faith virus. People infected by faith feel gratitude and appreciation for their affliction." To eradicate this cognitive illness, Boghossian proposed that we stigmatize faith-based claims like racist claims. Funny enough, this is followed by a Sam Harris The End of Faith quote. "People who harbor strong convictions without evidence belong at the margins of our societies, not in our halls of power." Yeah, I don't like strong convictions without evidence, but saying that we should marginalize people on I don't know about that one. One mid to long-term containment objective is to stigmatize faith as a methodology and faith-based claims that emerge from that methodology the way racist statements have been stigmatized. I've previously argued, along with Shermer, that's Michael Shermer, and others, that we need to deploy the model used in the civil rights movement. I'll put this quote on screen instead of reading through all of this, but yeah, I'm not exactly sure that purposely marginalizing people for their religious beliefs is akin to something that was done in the civil rights movement to fight racism. Boghossian proposes that we treat faith as a public health crisis. Just as society has established mechanisms to deal with contagions, pathogens, and infectious diseases that affect our water, air, and food supply, with objectives like ensuring that the commons are free of toxins and preventing the spread of diseases, there's also an urgent need for large-scale interventions in educational systems, houses of worship, and other institutions that promote failed epistemologies. He advocates that psychiatrists remove religious exemption for delusion from the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. Actually putting my psychology degree to use here, the reason why religious ideas, be they supernaturalist or otherwise, are not considered to be delusions in the DSM is because they don't disrupt what psychologists would call or psychiatrists would call normative functioning. They don't disrupt your everyday life most of the time. In fact, they can actually add to your functioning and your well-being in everyday life. They're not kind of an unequivocally bad thing that mess things up for you. That's why they're not disorders. Sometimes religious beliefs, of course, can be harmful to yourself, and others lead to behaviors that are harmful for yourself and others, but they don't do so consistently enough to be considered pathological. It is crucial that the religious exemption for delusion be removed from the DSM. Once religious delusions are integrated into the DSM, entirely new categories of research and treatment into the problem of faith can be created. These will include removal of existing ethical barriers, changing treatments covered by insurance, including faith-based special education programs in the schools, helping children who have been indoctrinated into a faith tradition, and legitimizing interventions designed to rid subjects of the faith affliction. Removing the exemption that classifies a phenomenon as an officially recognized psychiatric disorder legitimizes research designed to cure the disorder. Why did we ever think this was worth promoting? Boghossian has since made a career out of opposing what he calls woke ideology, regularly referring to ideas with which he disagrees as pathologies. Atheism has been parasitized by social justice. Elon Musk says, yes. Himmler says, the woke mind virus is penetrating the firewalls of some of the smartest meat computers at a prodigious rate. Peter Boghossian replies, correct. Idea laundering is the mechanism the woke mind virus uses to legitimate itself.
There's a particularly powerful, Wilfred Riley calls it, a virus of the upper lower class. There's a particularly powerful mind virus in that you can think about it like a memeplex. And those beliefs literally exist to rip down Western civilization.
I'd argue that one of the very foundations of anti-woke thinking is the view that a broad variety of ideas and identities are pathologies and are representative of mental illness or inferiority. Under the guise of free speech advocacy, the anti-woke argue for private and public policies which aid their efforts to treat ideas and identities they don't like as diseases. Of course, the effect of these policies does not actually favor freedom of expression, but seeks to suppress it under the guise of concern for public health. Florida, arguably the anti-woke mecca, now treats gender diversity in its prison inmates as a mental illness to be cured, in stark disagreement with the consensus in the field of psychiatry that it is not. The state's utilization of public health infrastructure to cure short-term delusions in people the anti-woke don't like is eerily similar to the strategy Boghossian suggested to eliminate the faith virus. Pathologizing the other does exactly what Boghossian suggests it should, removes ethical barriers, and legitimizes interventions designed to rid subjects of the affliction. Big video on this coming eventually. I've been working on this for so long, it's taken so long to research and write that I decided to use this video as a kind of stepping stone toward that, so expect me to kind of repeat this point, but hopefully even better, later on down the road in a much larger video. So, when atheists started doing a version of this, calling religion a disease, it's no wonder that it attracted men like Boghossian, who would later become known primarily as an anti-woke pundit. For the next section, I'm bringing on my friend and fellow YouTuber Ocean Keltoy. We became friends when I still called myself an anti-theist several years ago, and he played a significant part in my transition out of that and into my current position, which is in support of religious pluralism. You ever just casually debate with someone and then end up getting wrecked so badly that you end up thanking them? Yeah, that was a humbling experience, and Ocean was very nice about it. I would highly recommend it.
Hey Drew, thanks for reaching out. I appreciate the opportunity. I think it's something worth pointing out is that anti-theism and pluralism are, as you no doubt learned, incompatible. Anti-theists seem to default to anti-pluralist arguments, and anti-theism is, on the other hand, strangely compatible with Christian nationalism on subjects like imperialism. And we have been seeing that manifest in recent years. And it seems like it shouldn't be the case, but the two have found themselves snuggling lately. And you may wonder, what the hell is this? Let's start with answering what anti-theism is in the first place. Sometimes when people are referring to anti-theism, they are referring to a 19th century usage, meaning someone who affirms that there is no God. But today, the term most often references the usage of Christopher Hitchens. In Letters to a Young Contrarian, he writes, "I'm not even an atheist so much as I am an anti-theist. I not only maintain that all religions are versions of the same untruth, but I hold that the influence of churches and the effect of religious belief is positively harmful." Anti-theism generally manifests as an opposition to the existence of religion because religious belief is necessarily harmful. Reasons for this are often given that focus primarily on the most extreme, while still popular, versions of Christianity and Islam. Many of these would be fair criticisms if they were just kept on target. The problem is, these criticisms of extremism would get applied to Christianity and Islam broadly, without regard for the varying differences in traditions across these faiths, and then, without skipping a beat, all of religion generally. So, to take an example that New Atheism would often focus on, conservative evangelical Christianity often requires a belief in creationism. Creationism is anti-science. So, Christianity is anti-science. Religion, all of it, is harmful because it is anti-science, you see. The target gets broader and broader until you get a statement that is akin to taking a shotgun to a cricket. Often, with anti-theist rhetoric, the word religion is just lazy language referring to specific forms of monotheist traditions. So, a common belief that comes along with anti-theism is that these problems that we have in society would just be solved if we just stopped being religious. However, I think it's become more clear over time, especially since the heyday of New Atheism, that the relationship between being religious and something like being anti-science may have some correlation, but not quite causation. There seems to be a wealth of atheists out there who are willing to be anti-science, and there are plenty of religious people who are aggressively pro-science. This would mean that whatever causes stuff like anti-science beliefs is not necessarily religion or God belief. It's something else, and if we're interested in truth, we should be focused on finding out more about that, rather than blaming the thing that feels good to blame. This proclivity among anti-theists actually creates an ally in Christian nationalism, weirdly enough. While anti-theism and Christian nationalism would seem to be more at odds than bedfellows, they share an imperialist desire to wipe out other religions, including Christianity. Now, I know that seems weird, but let me explain. Anti-theists certainly have criticisms of Christian nationalisms, no doubt about that. But when anti-theists talk about Islam, Hinduism, paganism, witchcraft, or any other religious tradition, the Christian nationalists will simply nod along, or at the very least, stay out of their way. The enemy of my enemy will do my work. But anti-theist rhetoric against Christianity will often work in favor of Christian nationalism, aiding in their imperialist mission. I described the lack of subtlety that anti-theists often have when discussing Christianity. This process essentializes the worst parts of Christianity into defining Christianity. Anti-theist rhetoric would have you believe that true Christianity is sexist, transphobic, homophobic, xenophobic, racist, and any litany of other bigotries. And the Christian nationalist goes, yeah, you're exactly right. All those progressive Christians out there, not real Christians. The Christian nationalist will say to the progressive Christian, listen to those who are politically on your side. They think you're LARPing. They don't respect you. They think you're just playing at your religion. Just ask them. If you want to be a Christian, you got to be one of us. It's imperialism within Christianity, and anti-theists are used to that end. Sometimes the quiet part is said out loud, or the imperialism is just done explicitly. Viewers of this channel are no doubt familiar with Ayaan Hirsi Ali, who recently publicly converted from atheism to Christianity. In her article explaining this, called Why I Am Now a Christian, she describes part of her journey to Christianity in terms of a pragmatic nationalist narrative rather than any particular theological argument or religious experience. For her, Christianity is the best defender of Western civilization against Russian and Chinese authoritarianism, Islamism, and the woke. A response to this was published by Michael Shermer, another noted atheist/anti-theist, who says that he agrees with the threats to Western civilization, but he credits Enlightenment humanism rather than Christianity as the great defender of the West. The problem is that they're both playing this same imperialist game, and both to the advantage of Christian nationalism. In his response, he performs exactly the method that I described earlier of essentializing the worst of Christianity and Islam into religion generally as part of framing the superiority of the Enlightenment. Pause if you want to go through it. Enlightenment thought and Christian thought have had their moments of converging on imperialism. I want to give an example that I came across rather accidentally while researching for my own channel. Professor of Classics, Paige DuBois, in her book on academic bias against polytheism called A Million and One Gods, discusses the German philosopher Hegel and his theories on religion. He viewed the religions of the world in terms of a hierarchy of spiritual development with his own Protestant Christianity at the top. Big surprise. Now, he ranked Hinduism particularly low on this scale. I didn't seem to know much about Hinduism, but that doesn't stop Hegel. While analyzing it, he said to his listening students, "It is difficult to get the sense of an alien religion from within. To put oneself in the place of a dog requires the sensibilities of a dog." Now, to be clear, according to one anonymous transcript, this is not true. He actually said elephant. So you see, these two forces converge on their imperialist goals. Anti-theism at large seems not to have unpacked this aspect. I believe if they had, they would just no longer be anti-theists. And that's not to say that Christianity and the Enlightenment haven't contributed positively to society. Of course they have. But maybe we should be having these conversations with a broader set of perspectives at the table. Perhaps, when investigating Hinduism, it may be preferable to first listen to the Hindu rather than Hegel. This general process of thinking, however, is dismissed as woke. And for both the anti-theist and the Christian nationalist, prioritizing the voice of a Hindu on Hinduism is problematic. Fortunately, they have found a one-word way of dismissing the entire prospect. On top of this, the Christian nationalist can say this through the mouth of the anti-theist, appealing to those who might not otherwise listen. In the words of an old friend, tearing things down is easy, building things up is hard. And I can poke holes in anti-theist thought all day, and this is really the tip of the iceberg, but what good is that without an alternative? Drew and I are mutual appreciators of Chrissy Stroop, a journalist who has produced a wealth of work on pluralism, including some handy-dandy infographics. Stroop writes that pluralism refers to people of diverse and conflicting beliefs coexisting peaceably, linked by their adherence to a shared social contract which commits members of different groups to treating others fairly and accommodating them equally in the public square. In a society with a wealth of perspectives ranging across gender, religion, ethnicity, race, sexuality, and a myriad of other categories, it seems at least pragmatic to have a foundation that allows us to listen to each other's perspectives and contribute ideas to our broader conversations. This pluralism should have standards, to be sure, with considerations to concepts such as the paradox of tolerance, separation of church and state, and the free expression of religion. But the goal of peaceful coexistence in a diverse society is a worthy goal, and it is one that both Christian nationalism and anti-theism would stand against, and for many of the same reasons. With that, I hand you back to Drew. Feel free to check out my channel in which I discuss polytheism and Germanic spirituality, religion of the Vikings basically, also known as heathenry. If you're here from my channel, hit that subscribe button. Drew makes a ton of great content and has long been a supportive friend. Back to you, sir.
Contrarianism. Most people in the world are religious, and even those who aren't are still more likely than not to believe in some sort of higher power. Some of the most powerful institutions in the world draw their authority from religion, and religion heavily impacts cultural norms basically everywhere. Choosing to stand apart from that by calling yourself an atheist can be a socially dangerous thing to do. I believe this acts as a selection pressure on the atheist world, selecting for those that have a contrarian aspect to their personalities and against those who do not. Straight-up antisocial attitudes may even be selected for in contexts where a person would face more stigma, such as in older, more religious generations and in more religious societies. The existence of this selection pressure does not suggest that all atheists are contrarian or antisocial, just that more atheists might be than the average population. The world of atheist celebrities, where people face stigma head-on in a very public way, is particularly affected by this selection pressure, I think. Richard Dawkins has long exemplified this.
How many of you believe in God? Okay, a forest of hands. So Richard Dawkins, these people are deluded. Every single one of them.
Well, I fear that's right, yes. I would say it's rather like the phenomenon of the imaginary friend that children have and that comfort them and console them. But there's actually not the slightest shred of evidence that any kind of supernatural being exists. So I'm sorry to say, deluded, yes.
To be clear, I'm not saying that this is an inherently bad thing. Prevailing norms and institutions need to be challenged at times. I'm actually glad that when certain American schools tried to add young Earth creationism to science curricula, folks like Dawkins stood up and said, no, that's bullshit. But contrarian and antisocial attitudes cut both ways. When women began finding prominence in the atheist skeptic world and said that men should stop harassing them, or at least be cognizant of ways they might make women in the community uncomfortable, Dawkins polemicized against them. And now, when most atheists surveyed say that society has not gone far enough to accept and support trans people, Dawkins has joined the coalition of the anti-woke, gender-critical folks.
In this movement, the people who are willing to speak on this issue are often people who have been through some crucible beforehand. And those can be good, bad, or indifferent things as far as I'm concerned. Lots of Brexiteers, lots of anti-vaxxers, lots of evangelical Christians.
Societies. Let me address, for example, child marriage. Okay, the idea of childhood is actually a modern concept. It's something that, if you look at the anthropology of childhood, anthropologists will note that the idea of childhood is something that's very new, only less than 200 years old. And the idea is that when you have a kinship-based society and you have a certain lifespan, then children are expected to be contributing to the family. They're expected to contribute to society and to their community, because there's not a career that they're pursuing. There's not a need for a technical education that extends for 12, 14, 16 years.
I pause a little. Let me interrupt.
Yeah.
So you think that having sex with a 9-year-old is justified?
Yeah. I mean, the thing is that so here, let me ask you a question. Okay, is the problem with
I'm asking you a question.
Well, I have to frame it. Okay, so do you have a problem with child marriage because you think it is categorically wrong, or is it because it's conditionally wrong?
Well, I'm asking you the question.
I want to understand what your understanding is, because I think that the Prophet, peace be upon him, his marriage to Aisha was at 9 years of age.
21.
So do you think that I don't think that that's wrong? I can explain it and justify it, and I'm trying to give you the entire anthropological explanation, the historical explanation of that. But like I said, it can't be done in 5 minutes. I want to simplify it and say, do you think that this is categorically wrong, or is it conditionally wrong?
Categorically wrong.
If you think that it's categorically wrong to have those kinds of relationships, do you think that other kinds of sexual behavior can be categorically wrong?
As long as it harms somebody, as long as it doesn't
if you mention harm, then it's not categorical. It's conditional based on harm.
But the category that you're introducing is a category that will be harmful in all situations in that category. That's
how can you if you specify conditions, that's conditional. It's not categorical.
Okay, so let's move on to the next one.
You didn't really answer the question.
Yeah, because because you want me to bring up why. You want me to explain why it's not okay to have sex with a 9-year-old?
In a particular social context, in a particular historical milieu.
I mean, to me,
yes, it can be something that is moral and is acceptable. I can agree with you and say that within this particular context, if you take a 9-year-old who is still watching, Dora the Explorer, and it has, that kind of cultural background in the situation they are,